Hey guys, welcome back to Cult of Film. We're going to roll right on with basically some of what I think are the best films of the genre for Halloween month. I hope you guys are enjoying spooky season, and I hope you're digging into these films that we've curated, these lists. I really am super picky about the stuff that I watch, and even more of the stuff that I recommend. And I guarantee you, like the other lists that we've done, today's best vampire movies, I think you guys are really going to enjoy. There is such a, I guess, cornucopia, a diaspora of incredible work that's been done in the genre. And I don't know what it is, but horror really just seems to have the greatest depth and breadth of what you can do with it. I would say second would be sci-fi. And then sort of it kind of goes down from there. But yeah, let's roll on. These are what I consider, based on my expert opinion, are the best vampire movies, uh, basically that have ever been made. So, because I know so much. But number one is a movie called Vampyr, Vampyr, and that is from 1932 from a Danish director, Carl Theodor Dreyer. Dreyer, I discovered on the Criterion Channel, like I have a lot of really great international directors. This, I believe, was his first film, and it's an extremely beautiful gothic film. For some reason, I couldn't remember if it was a silent film or if it had sound. It does have sound, but very minimal dialogue because I believe it was filmed in Germany in the early 30s. So yeah, not great sound design, but because it's sort of a creepy, spooky film about a vampire, it really works. It's all obviously black and white. The old timey cameras lend a certain sort of grain and character to the film itself. It I would never have watched a film like this 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but my palette has really expanded probably over just the last 5 years. And I discovered Dreyer through another film that he did called The Word, or Det. I believe Ordet is the Danish word for the word, meaning the word of God. One of the most incredible films I've ever seen. I'm not really a religious film guy, but if a film is good, I don't really care what genre it is. But yeah, going back to Vampyr, I believe this was his first feature. It's about a young man who arrived. He's kind of just kicking around the world, traveling. He arrives in a small village, gets a room for the night, and then odd things begin to happen. I won't ruin it, but it is a beautiful, beautiful film. Yeah, a lot of incredible sets. The looks of the actors. These are not classically beautiful actors, but it lends to, again, the character of the film. There was a time when you could be a character actor. You didn't have to have the perfect Fibonacci sequence of your face, and you could actually be talented and be cast in films. Amazing, right? But yeah, Vampyr, 1932, Carl Theodor Dreyer, worth your time. The next one is probably the most off kilter, the most one of the most interesting takes on the vampire myth. This film is called Ganja and Hess from 1973. This film was directed by Bill Gunn, and unless you're a cinephile, you probably don't know who Bill Gunn was. Sadly, he's not with us. Bill Gunn was a very accomplished playwright, actor, and director who came out of New York. He, I believe, got his start in either the 50s or 60s, and by the early 70s, had begun to start directing his own features. And while we don't have a whole lot of them, we have Ganja and Hess. There's a yet unreleased film of his that I'm blanking on the name of it. I believe either Columbia or Paramount. Someone has it. It's sitting in a vault, and for whatever reason, it's never been released. We need to fix that. And then I believe his last film was actually set to be a series for PBS called Personal Problems, which was it takes place in New York City in 1980 about two African American families. It kind of looks like a found footage film, but it's not horror. It's just pure slice of life drama. It is one of the most incredible viewing experiences I've ever had. The guy could do anything. I think he had written like dozens and dozens of plays. So the guy was super, super talented, but for whatever reason, couldn't catch as many breaks as I think he deserved. But we do have Ganja and Hess. And Ganja and Hess is, I guess you could say it's an art house film that scares a lot of people away. I don't think that's fair. I think it's more of a cult vampire film. What it really is just a beautifully original take on the vampire myth. It is the only vampire film I've ever seen where the vampire origin, the myth of the concept of the vampire, does not come from the European myth of Vlad Tepes or the Central Eastern European myths of vampires. That's really in the West. That's sort of where our understanding of it comes from. In Ganja and Hess, it's actually African in origin, and I won't spoil too much for you. Suffice to say that the film's lead is the late great Dwayne Jones. Those of you who are big fans of the absolute masterpiece Night of the Living Dead, directed by our late great George A. Romero, will recognize Dwayne Jones as he was the lead in Night of the Living Dead. Dwayne Jones, he's an interesting guy. He did a bit of acting and ended up becoming a pretty prolific drama instructor at, was it NYU or SUNY? I can't remember where, but the guy was pretty prolific. He only did a handful of films, but of the stuff that I've seen, the guy was just incredible. Obviously, he was perfect in Night of the Living Dead, and he's absolutely fantastic in Ganja and Hess. Ganja and Hess is about a Dr. Hess, played by Dwayne Jones, who is both an anthropologist and a geologist. And upon an accident with an ancient knife from a long lost tribe in Africa, he begins to crave blood. I won't say more than that because it's just such a beautiful film. And just anything I could sort of describe for this film won't do it justice. It is so beautifully shot. It feels very fever dream. A lot of great horror films have that fever dream feel. You know, films like Suspiria, Ganja and Hess is sort of in that vein because it looks like it was shot on 16 millimeter. Again, very grainy, beautiful sort of character, cloudy aspect to the film, which lends to a horror film, which Ganja and Hess is. But Ganja and Hess does address how someone might really feel if they had this urge, this craving for human blood. You know, what do you do with that? How do you as a human being look over to another human being and say, I really need what she has, but unfortunately, it might not go well for her. All those things are addressed. There is a depth and sort of poetic nature to the dialogue in this film that Bill Gunn wrote. Bill Gunn also appears, he plays a role in the film as well. I love it when writer-directors believe so much in what they're doing that they understand their characters probably better than anyone, are unafraid to put themselves in their own films. And he's in it, and he's fantastic. I do think you may have to crank the volume on it because the volume can get a little bit low at times, and you really want to hear this dialogue. It's very, like I said, poetic, very interesting. It can be very esoteric at times, but the cast is fantastic. The female lead in it is an actress named Marlena Clark, or is it? I'm not sure if it's Marlena or Marlene Clark, but she's fantastic too. The film is pretty much dominated by New York area actors, sort of those Northeast great stage actors, which also does wonders for the film. So again, incredible top tier cast. Again, that very New York Northeast theater actor pretty much staffs the entire cast of this movie, which again, nothing against people that haven't ever done stage, but there's something about a stage actor I'm biased towards, and I love it. But Ganjin Hess, directed again by the great Bill Gunn, a small filmography for this guy, but if you're going to start anywhere, I would say this is probably his best known film, the most original take on the vampire myth, starring the just magnanimous Dwayne Jones. Check this one out. I believe this one is currently streaming free on Tubi. It jumps between Tubi and Amazon Prime, so you can usually find it somewhere. And if worse comes to worse, there's a really grainy, I think, VHS rip of it on YouTube. So next up is Martin, 1977, directed by George A. Romero. This film we have reviewed for the channel. I was really surprised that we got as many views on this film as we did. I had heard about this film for years. I never watched it. I think there was a period of time where I just didn't think very highly of Romero, because I was an idiot, and for many years was sort of away from the horror genre, and just for whatever reason. And when I got pulled back into it really fast and hard in 2019, and now just absolutely adore the genre, went back deep, and of course finally sat down and watched Night of the Living Dead all the way through, understood the masterpiece that it was. But then I continued to explore Romero's other films from the 70s. He's really just known for, or most widely known for, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and these other dead movies that they keep cranking out with or without him. But he did a lot of very interesting original other films in the 70s outside of the zombie genre. And Martin was the shot that he took at vampires. Again, you could see that. I did, again, an entire episode on that, but I'm happy to reiterate here. Martin, like Ganjin Hess, like the early films that Romero did, I believe was shot on 16 millimeters, so it's got that beautiful, grainy, gritty, sort of 70s cloudy feel, which only helps, in my opinion, a horror film. It centers around a young man named Martin who arrives sort of in a some Pennsylvania town where industry has left. It seems like there's little glimmers of hope, a very depressed area. He arrives to talk to his uncle, who is basically Van Helsing. I don't know how else to explain this guy. He is a old school Eastern European man who is very much a convicted Christian, and Martin has come to him for help. I'm still not exactly sure of his motivations. It doesn't matter. The story that unfolds is so compelling. Martin himself does have this addiction to blood, and it seems at times that he knows or believes he's a vampire. He knows he needs to do this thing, meaning take blood from people, but it's not always clear that he understands what he is. There's times where he sort of makes fun of it, but we sort of learn that there's a lot more to Martin than it seems. He looks like a kid. He looks like a kid maybe of like 19 or 20, but we learn there's way more to him. He's living with this, very sort of severe Christian uncle and his daughter, who she's interesting too. She's very much against the old ways, the old world. She's not religious. She's interesting. You have the super domestic side of life of just a young woman trying to grow up, in the late 70s and sort of articulate her independence from her very conservative uncle. And in the middle of it all, her vampire cousin is staying with them. It's fun. It's interesting. You really get a sense of what it must be like. Again, like Ganjin Hess, Martin does a great job at examining the human condition, even if that human is a vampire. That it's not just about the kills. It's not just about blood. And these movies aren't, I don't think they're particularly gory. I mean, when there's bloody scenes, there's bloody scenes, but it doesn't lean on that at all. It is ultimately a drama about the human condition, about if you were really in the situation, what would you do? And again, this goes to the brilliance of George Romero. He did another film similar to this called Season of the Witch, which I believe was released under the title Hungry Wives, which examines sort of a unfulfilled middle-aged housewife who discovers witchcraft. And again, really interesting takes on these horror myths, but putting them sort of in our contemporary world and trying their absolute best to understand how would this work, how would this feel if you had access to the power of witchcraft and you were an unfulfilled woman in an unfulfilling marriage, and your daughter was almost on her way out of the house. What might you do if you were a man who was basically stuck at the age of 20 but couldn't die and just wanted human contact, but racked with guilt over what you have to do to humans because you're addicted to blood? Whoa, super heavy. And of all these films are and have a heaviness to them, there's also like a just a several glints of sympathy and love and even romance in the case of Martin. And so, yeah, definitely on your must see list. Martin, I believe, is also on Tubi. I can't say enough nice things about Tubi. Tubi, they have everything. They are an ad revenue streamer, so there are ads, but the ads aren't too intrusive. And again, the depth and breadth of streamers like Tubi for me are better, frankly, than some that I pay for. Because I like weird stuff, I like interesting stuff. I don't like all the new slick, overproduced stuff that comes out that just has no soul. Not saying all of it doesn't have any soul, but maybe half of it. Anyways, on to the next one. Salem's Lot, 1979, directed by the great Tobe Hooper. Tobe Hooper, was the director of Texas Chainsaw Massacre and of the first Poltergeist. A super, super talented guy. Salem's Lot, the version I'm referring to is the 3 hour and 20-minute movie that was compiled from the television miniseries that aired in 79. I have never seen the miniseries. I've only watched the film compilation, and Salem's Lot was based on the Stephen King novel. I really like this film. I think the runtime used to really push people away, but now that we're watching 3.5 hour Avengers films, it's sort of par for the course. It doesn't really matter how long a film is necessarily, as long as it moves and it's interesting. And Salem's Lot moves, it's interesting. It really does a great job of establishing just incredible spooky atmosphere, but it also has a great story. And the practical effects in this, for it being a television miniseries, is so impressive. And, I'll watch it. It was genuinely scary, like really terrifying. These vampires are sort of stalking this town of Salem, and just I've seen vampire movies of the last 20 years that don't come as close, don't come anywhere near the atmosphere, the sense of dread, the sense of fun, the sense of just beauty, how these films are executed back in the day. So well done. The head vampire is terrifying. I mean, they're all terrifying. Tobe Hooper absolutely knocked it out of the park. I can't think of any actors in this that maybe any of you would know, so I'm not going to dig into that. But Salem's Lot is true comfort horror. It feels like a movie that would have aired on local TV when you were a kid. It delivers the scares. It delivers the beautifully composed shots. It's real. It's not schlocky 70s horror, and there's plenty of that out there. But Salem's Lot, 79, Tobe Hooper, also I believe streaming several places now for free, or I think with Prime if you have Amazon Prime. This next one is one that I have watched probably as much as Blade Runner. And it comes up in certain lists, but I still don't think it gets nearly as much love as it should. The Hunger from 1983, directed by Tony Scott, the brother to Ridley Scott. May he rest in peace. He passed away some years back. Incredibly talented guy. The Hunger stars, get this cast: David Bowie, Catherine Deneuve, and Susan Sarandon. It centers around Susan Sarandon's character, who is a doctor in New York City in the early 80s, and she ends up encountering um, this sort of like reclusive but beautiful woman played by Catherine Deneuve, and her husband, the angular and odd but strangely compelling David Bowie. And this couple, they are in fact vampires, and that's pretty well established at the very beginning of the film. I don't want to give anything away. Let's just say that Tony Scott was definitely channeling early MTV at the opening of this film. It's one of the most noir vampire films, or just noir films, that I've ever seen. He and his brother Ridley just were just blowing noir out of the water with Blade Runner and The Hunger. I kind of feel like The Hunger has the romance, the existential beauty, the aesthetic beauty of Blade Runner, even though it is a horror film, and there are some bloody scenes. It's one of the most romantic horror films that I've ever seen, centering around life and the concept of, if you could live forever, would you? What is the cost of that? Uh, I really love I love the whole cast, but I particularly love Susan Sarandon in this film. Again, it's early 80s, and she has very short hair. And I really love that look of women from the early 80s that were willing to just chop their hair off. There's something really super sexy to me about Susan Sarandon in this film. I mean, she's always been sexy. I haven't seen her lately. I'm sure she still is. She's just one of my favorite actors ever. I think she can do anything. But this film in particular, in Tony Scott's hands with this cast, everybody's just amazing. David Bowie is amazing. Catherine Deneuve, if you don't know who that is, Catherine Deneuve came out of the French New Wave of the 60s. She is a powerhouse herself, maybe one of the most beautiful and talented women to ever grace the screen. And she, while she doesn't have a ton of dialogue, she doesn't have minimal dialogue either. It's just the words, the measured economy of words that she has in this film, just she is the most enigmatic vampire character I've ever seen on film. I adore this movie. It probably is my favorite. No, it is my favorite on this entire list. I'm not saying it's better than others, just the way it sort of came together and came out. Uh, you can find it once in a while on different streamers. I feel like this one isn't as readily available. I, of course, have bought physical media and digital copies of this, but The Hunger, it haunts you long after it's over. I love this film. Let's move on to 1987, The Lost Boys, directed by Joel Schumacher. I think most people know The Lost Boys. This is one of those real gems from the 80s. The 80s being the decade that Tarantino really hates, because it got away from, in his opinion, and I think that there's some validity to it, the 80s got away from the auteurship and the real authorship of people like Friedkin and Scorsese and Frankenheimer that had so much authorship on their films in the 70s. The 80s kind of took that away. It became very much about more blockbusters and bigger films. And I love all those too. But The Lost Boys, I think, is one of those examples of a film, and I can't remember if Tarantino likes it or not, but it's so off kilter. It's, again, vampires, but it's vampires taking place in Northern California. I believe it was shot in Santa Cruz, in the boardwalk there, and it's called Santa Clara or Santa Carla, I think, in the film. A young Kiefer Sutherland. We have the Coreys, Haim, and Feldman in this movie, just perfectly cast, just really funny and terrifying. The vampires really look great. The vampires, to me, sort of echo a look that was established in 1979's Salem's Lot that we just discussed. Just how their teeth look. They're not completely human, but they're kind of human. It doesn't shy away from, I won't say gore, but it does get messy And yeah, Joel Schumacher and company really, pardon the pun, killed it in this film. Again, this was another film I think that was really, really affected aesthetically from the MTV age of the 80s. Everybody looks really sort of rocker sexy in this film. Uh, and that helps it along. I don't know how you could remake it. I keep hearing that they're going to. I don't know. I'm not saying you can't remake great films because you can, and there's great examples. We'll do a video on what I think are some of the best remakes ever. But it's just so perfectly done. I think if you did remake it, you'd have to remake it in contemporary times. You can't try to do exactly what Schumacher did. But it's fun. Again, very MTV, very 80s, very sexy, very gothic. Again, so much of rock and roll and heavy metal has sort of those traces of gothic sensibility and aesthetics, and it's absolutely in this film. So check it out, The Lost Boys, 1987, directed by Joel Schumacher. And of course, uh, couldn't leave this one off. Bram Stoker's Dracula, 1992, directed by the great Francis Ford Coppola. This movie is beautiful. It is one of the most sumptuous movies I've ever seen. It's so rich. Besides the fact that Coppola is a master director, has an incredible cast, an incredible script, so much of this movie is its visuals, the incredible costume design, the incredible sets, the makeup, the lighting. Absolutely beautiful film, and at the core of it, a really strong drama. Of course, we have Gary Oldman as the titular Dracula, but he's not just the titular Dracula. He plays 4 or 5 different versions of Dracula in this film, as if we didn't know that Gary Oldman was brilliant. He literally plays, again, multiple versions of the same character within this film. We have a very young Winona Ryder and Keanu Reeves, as well as Jonathan Harkness and not Lucy. I can't remember her name. But oh, and of course, the great Anthony Hopkins as Van Helsing in this film is just this volcanic in his energy. I love it when he comes face to face with a vampire. It's just, oh, I don't know if he got an Oscar for this film, but he should have, or at least an Oscar nomination. This was a really beautifully. It's not to compare greats to greats, but there's something purely Coppola about this film. Those of you who have seen Apocalypse Now, The Godfather, Godfather 2, I try not to compare greats to other greats, and I'm not meaning to do that, but there's something Kubrickian about Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I hope Coppola would take that as a compliment. It's just so photographic. It's so well composed that of his films, all of which are great, all of which are masterpieces. He's so good. This one, I don't know if it just sticks out for me just because I like the genre, I like the character or whatnot, but it's the one that rings loudest for me in my mind's eye is Bram Stoker's Dracula. So, and again, this one's up all the time. I've seen this on Netflix, I've seen this on Tubi, I've seen this on Amazon Prime, I've seen it on Max. So this one is not hard to find at all, and is just a beautiful, beautiful film. I feel it's the one vampire film that women almost love more than men. Men will watch a solid vampire film, but the heart of this film, I have seen uh, I've seen that articulated more from women who are into film than men, and I think that's another that deep dark romance aspect of it again separates it from the pack. He just did a beautiful job of adapting the novel to film. So yeah, Bram Stoker's Dracula, '92, Francis Ford Coppola. It's good for you. This next one I saw years after it came out of the theater. I didn't know it was based on a graphic novel, which is also quite good. 30 Days of Night from 2007, directed by David Slade. And this guy, oh my God, he kicks so much ass on this film. It's about an Alaska, a community up in Alaska that they're so far up there that they will go through 30 days of night. So basically, an entire month with no daylight. And well, wouldn't you know it, a pack of vampires are aware of this, and they invade this Alaskan town while there's no sunlight. So they have, they've got basically free reign. These have to be the most terrifying vampires I've ever seen, and they're brutal. They have absolutely no mercy. There isn't a ton of dialogue between the two of them, or between them in this film, but what there is, it's I can only they're true monsters. I think. Let me know. It's 30 Days of Night. I want to pull up the cast here because Josh Hartnett is the lead. We all know Josh Hartnett from. I first remember him from The Faculty, which is also another fun sort of tweenish horror film that holds up. You have Melissa George. Danny Houston is sort of the lead vampire. Danny Houston, this guy works constantly. He's an incredible actor, does a lot of character roles. You've seen him. He's one of those guys you don't know his name, but when you see him, oh, that guy. He's fantastic. Ben Foster is in this. Who else? Yeah, this was one of those films I think it did okay in theaters, but I feel like it's one of those films that really got its due long after. And yeah, 30 Days of Night, it's just, what do you do? There's no sunlight. These folks are superhuman. They're super fast. They can fly. Uh, and I think it's a good adaptation of the graphic novel too. Not you need to read the graphic novel. This one is also, I believe, on Tubi now, or if not Tubi, it's some other. This one pops up a lot for Halloween season, and again, along with all these others, should definitely be in your rotation, in or out of Halloween season. Just really, really um, intense, truly scary horror. Some of these films that are on here they're beautiful, they're well executed, they're fun to watch, but not all of them are super scary. 30 Days of Night is terrifying, truly. And the last one, and another one of my favorites because it is again, a creative, different take on the vampire myth. The Swedish film Let the Right One In, 2008, directed by Thomas Alfredson. There has been an American remake made of this that I haven't seen. I'm not saying you can't redo that, but I don't understand why Hollywood remakes some of these European horror films mere years after the original version comes out. I'm not saying you can't, and I'm not judging those products. I just haven't seen them. But Let the Right One In, 2008. Yes, it is in Swedish. Don't watch an English dub version of it. Grow up, read subtitles, and watch it in Swedish. Is about literally a young girl who is a vampire and makes friends with a human boy in the midst of Swedish winter. And if that alone isn't enough to grab you, literally, to watch this film, I don't know what is. This is definitely in the territory of a Ganja and Hess, of a Martin, that takes that concept of vampire and just puts it in a different context and makes it infinitely more interesting. Uh, it While it leverages the things we know about the vampire myth, the concept of vampires, and does so sparingly but beautifully, it ultimately is just kind of it's truly a story of friendship and love and the need for companionship. And again, if you were in this situation, what would you do when you seek human companionship, human friendship, human love, but the thing that keeps you alive are humans? So again, this won't be one that you're going to race to see, but you really should. You really should. It's one of my favorite. I've watched this probably 5 times. It's just a beautiful example of not just an original vampire story, but just an original, beautiful human drama. Again, beautifully composed, beautifully shot, incredible restraint for a vampire movie, which just makes it so much stronger. But yeah, again, make sure you see this. Let the Right One In, 2008, directed by Thomas Alfredson. That's my list of recommends for today, guys. If there's something I've missed, something you think I would enjoy, please mention the comments below. If you enjoyed this, please like and share. If you didn't enjoy this, please hate me in the comments. Help me with the algorithm either way. But yeah, and don't hesitate. Then, if there's stuff either related to horror movies, vampire movies, or stuff completely unrelated, I'm open. I love recommendations. If you guys have been following the channel for any period of time, you guys have kind of a sense of what we do around here, and I'm open to seeing new things and reviewing new stuff. And I mean, new films or old films. Again, if there's something that I've missed you think would be worth my time, please mention below. But have a great, safe Halloween. I hope you guys enjoy these films, and I'll see you in the next one. All right.